I don't even know where to start from all of the things that have been said that are just wrong.
Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brand John never wants to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
John, years ago, one of my bosses said, the best communicators communicate with an economy of words. Okay? Have you ever heard that before?
I have. Yeah, I've heard it from you within the last 2 weeks.
Okay.
It's one of your favorite quotes on the show.
Yesterday morning, after we got off the air and I was listening to Armstrong and Getty, what I thought was a very funny line. They were talking about the fact that history classes, that history, you go to school and they talk about, the World War II era and what led up to World War II and Hitler in the 30s and into the 40s and, all these different eras of history. And they said there will be a whole course taught on July of 2024.
I've heard that too, Brad. 25 years of history, I've heard people say happened in July. Roughly.
Right.
When it comes to the newsiness.
And it just doesn't stop. It just keeps. There's so many crazy things that have gone on yesterday. I mean, first off, we have the Secret Service lady who resigned, and I will talk about this again during the show, and I won't want to get into the top three, but I once again do not understand why people don't relive the history of World War II and pre-World War II with Hitler exterminating the Jews and the Nazis' campaign of trying to wipe out. Essentially, his goal was to wipe out an entire, what do you call it, race? I don't know if you could necessarily call Jewish people a race. Would you call them a race?
Yeah, I think I would.
Well, he tried to wipe them all out. Okay. Yesterday, all this crazy stuff happened where they're protesting because Netanyahu's in town.
Yeah.
And if you heard the top of the hour newscast just on Fox, that Kamala Harris has sort of snubbed Netanyahu. She was supposed to be with him today, but no, she's on a campaign stop in Indiana. And Jason Smith, do you know the Missouri tie to this?
What's the update? I saw him post on social yesterday.
Do you have this in your? Is this?
I don't. Go ahead.
They had a special hearing yesterday, and it was supposed to be on the situation with the what's happened with the Jewish people in the United States and how they're being taunted and people are outright saying we should exterminate the Jewish people, and they had a congressional hearing yesterday, and none of the Democrats showed up. And
I see that headline. In fact, Brad, I'm adding that in real time right now.
Because of and I'm going like, okay, once again, and Jewish people, I know it's Jewish people, they tend to be very vote very, very democratic. Am I kidding on that?
Yeah, and that could certainly be threatened this election cycle, couldn't it?
Right, okay. Anyway, that's John Combest.
Well, Brad, I would say, Brad, after going to the Netanyahu protest that I attended yesterday, I will say, just to be balanced, that you do sound like a Zionist.
Thank you, John. I'll take that as a compliment, I guess. I don't know. Okay, that's John Combest, Combest. I spell the name because you need that spelling when you go on the web and type in JOHN, Combest.com. That will take you to his site. Nothing fancy. John's proud of the fact that there's no graphics or any kind of crazy charts or stuff like that. It's down and dirty aggregation. It's down and dirty to the point where think of it as Missouri version of the Drudge Report. And we start off the show where John, and I have no idea where he's going with this. Sometimes, every once in a while, I get it right. Yesterday, I got it totally wrong. I had one that I thought was going to be number one. Wasn't even the top three yesterday. John gives us the top three. We start off with this guy.
I'm Casey.
And what he does is,
we're on our way to the number one.
And he counts us down, and we start with,
in third place.
Some good news for people who drive through and work in and occasionally dine in Clayton. Clayton is getting something brand new that it doesn't have yet, Brad. Do you know what's coming to Clayton in 2025?
White Castle?
No, but it's a place that you would go right after White Castle. And that is a marijuana dispensary, Brad.
Oh,
I guess you would go to the dispensary before you go to White Castle. Yes, an Arkansas-based company, Good Day Farms, is opening up in Clayton. And Brad, I bring this up not just because you're a huge marijuana enthusiast, but because you worked for many years in Clayton, and I worked in Clayton as well. This location will be at 118 South Hanley Road. Now, do you want to give I know that you know the area really well. Do you want to give an explanation of kind of where that is, Brad?
South Hanley, the way it works is Forsyth is the discrimination point, or whatever you want to call it, between North and South Hanley. So in other words, if you're north of Forsyth, you're on North Hanley. If you're south of Forsyth, you're on South Hanley, and that would put it. Is that in the Centene building, or where?
Yeah, I think it's just south. Yeah, so you're right. So I didn't know, by the way, Brad, that was the delineation, like the demarcation line there. It's across from, a lot of folks listening to this will probably recognize the Capitol Grill, which used to be J. Buck's.
Oh, yeah.
So if you think just east of where J. Buck's is, there's a couple buildings right there. And I just looked this up, so I didn't look at the street view of exactly what the building looks like. But folks generally know where that is, I think, in Clayton. And it used to be a tanning salon, Brad. So where sweet little Clayton trollops would go tan their Caucasoid butts, you can now go in, going in February or March of 2025, and you can get your cannabis here in Clayton. Now, there's an interesting quote from a woman who's an alderwoman, and she says, there are very few places in Clayton where we can actually have a dispensary because we're not a very big city and we have lots of churches and schools. So this is one of the few places. So I think that's pretty interesting too, Brad. And when you think about it, think of when you drive through Clayton, how many schools and daycares and churches you see in a relatively compact area. So the folks from Good Day Farms are also opening up a location in St. Louis City, and I believe we talked about this place too. It's a block away from the Live for Life Academy Charter School.
Yeah,
and we discussed how funny it is to have a dispensary located so near a daycare. Or a charter school, I should say.
The Live for Life, I know some people. As a matter of fact, at one point in time, believe it or not, I was being recruited to be on the board for the Live for Life, and I just told them up front that I'm not a good board person.
Yeah, well, they had read your history with MoDOT, too, and I think that they were just trying to give you a second chance, Brad.
Going back to the marijuana dispensary place, I believe this location is right next to the car wash, if my memory serves me correctly.
Yeah, it says that it used to be it says that there used to be a car wash there. I guess there's not a car wash there anymore, Brad?
I thought there was. I thought it was in there recently, and I saw the car wash. Maybe.
Well, I don't know. I think most car wash places are focused now on St. Charles because there's so few in St. Charles County. I don't see any car washes when I drive through St. Charles County, Brad.
Can I tell you what? I got a free car wash. I shouldn't tell you this. I rarely wash my car. I got a free car wash Sunday down in Chesterfield Valley because they opened up the new Scrubbles, and everybody was getting free car washes.
No way. By the way, you are right, Brad. It is adjacent to a car wash and offices, so the car wash is still there. It surprises me that you're not a car wash guy, Brad.
Do you know? I mean, John, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but am I good with my Clayton geography?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Of course you are, Brad. Well, you worked there for many years, right?
11 years.
And you had led to such an infestation at your old radio station that they tore it down, right?
Well, to the point where I give this example all the time. They tore the building down, and some of the guys I used to work with are still at that address. You know, it's
yeah, because they're underground, right?
Well, it's the county jail. Well, you know.
Yeah, well, so that's good. I like that joke, Brad.
Yeah, what?
Now, also, when you talk about tearing buildings down and putting new ones up, you need some cement, and that rolls nicely into number 2, Brad.
Okay, but before we move on, can I ask you one question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I get a nice, clean repeat of a line you said earlier so I can pull that off for future use as a drop?
Absolutely.
Okay, how did you describe the women who are going to go to the tanning?
Oh, sweet little Clayton trollops tanning their Caucasoid buttocks. I mean, have you known women from Clayton, Brad?
Yeah.
I bet you. I mean, I don't mean in the biblical sense. I mean, there's, never mind.
Well, yes. I matter of fact, I do know people who live in Clayton, and they disown me because they won't have anything to do with me. But that's a whole other story. Okay, number 2.
Up a notch to number 2.
Great news for a cement manufacturer in Missouri down in Cape Girardeau. Wholesome Company, Brad. They are the largest cement manufacturer. I said Cape Girardeau. I meant St. Genevieve. Sorry. They're the largest cement manufacturer in the country, and they are getting $1.3 million. Do you know, Brad, put you on the spot, what are they getting $1.3 million from the EPA to do?
I know exactly what you're talking about, and I don't know the specific case, but there is a whole thing, just when you thought the environmentalist movement can't get weirder, there's a whole thing about how cement, concrete creates terrible pollution, and we should eliminate concrete. That's great. Build your house. Try building your new house instead of using like fiberglass panels for the basement or something like that. But is that what that is?
Now, I live in a house that's made purely of adobe, Brad, because I am so opposed to the cement and the concrete industry that I just built. I put a bunch of mud outside and I let it dry in the sun.
Did I get that right about the pollution?
You're right, though, Brad. It's carbon emissions.
Yes.
$1.3 million to report and reduce carbon emissions. So this is the type of spending, Brad, that in a hypothetical, you think that, and we don't need to recover this because we've covered it quite a bit lately, you don't believe that Donald Trump will get elected. But if hypothetically we were to have a Donald Trump administration, I don't think you would see $160 million nationwide in grants going to companies to help report their carbon emissions. Do you, Brad?
Well, now, all they're going to do is report their carbon emissions?
Yeah, well, they're going to report, and then they're also going to reduce carbon emissions by studying what they're doing now and best practices and how to get a little bit better at it. The quote from Jill Benoit, who's Wholesome Senior Manager of Grants, Jill Benoit, not to be confused with former WWF champion Chris Benoit, or the Benoit that involves female orifices. She says it's don't Google that. She says it's important for construction manufacturers to be aware of the effect they have on the environment. It's all for reducing our carbon footprint, she said. Now, here's what's interesting about her quote, Brad. She says, we're such a big emitter, and we're trying to do our part. So this is, some ownership from Wholesome of they're saying, hey, we're such a big emitter, and we're trying to do our part. I'm guessing that was part of their application, Brad, to the EPA of saying, hey, our industry does a lot of stuff that contributes to carbon. That's why we need millions of dollars.
John, as a former comms guy for Monsanto and Bayer, would you ever say something like that where you come out and say, yeah, we're a big polluter? Yeah.
So without violating anything I may or may not have signed years back, I would say that we've had a lot of conversation in the Monsanto days, Brad, about the extent to which we blame farmers for carbon emissions and for our role in sustainability because of an issue that you talked about in the last few days on this show, Brad, which is that farmers are the natural environmentalists. So on one hand, to come out and say, our industry does so many bad things, we tear up that soil and we affect the flow of water when consumers might not have already associated us with environmental issues. You get what I'm saying? Why take responsibility for an issue that you are only a tiny part of just so you can puff your chest out and say, we're doing something. So it was a huge internal debate. I can share that, Brad.
So, but in other words, what you're saying is that probably would not have been if you would have been the comms guy for this Wholesome construction or concrete company. Would you say, yeah, we're a big emitter? Would you say, I mean, to me that could be worded so much better.
Maybe, but also consider that these folks don't work in a vacuum, Brad. So this woman who would talk to the folks in the regulatory group says, look, there's a lot of money on the table if we say, hey, we're doing the best we can, but we can do even better. Look at this pile of money. Let's talk about that. And then your company comes out and says, yes, cement, we'd have a lot of emissions, and for only X million dollars, we can do so much better.
I don't get it, but there are a lot of things I don't get anymore. Okay, last but not least,
the number one.
Coming straight out of Jefferson City, Scott Fawn's midweek update yesterday, Brad. Now, Scott does a good job when he does it just by himself, when he talks into the camera. He does a great job when he has a guest, when he has even a co-host, so to speak. He had fundraiser extraordinaire Casey Burns sitting in the guest chair with him yesterday, Brad. And they ran through the top races in the state of Missouri, actually each statewide race. I won't give away any of the punchlines, Brad, but Scott on the show yesterday and in his statewide tip sheet, which I linked to this morning at johncombest.com, he picks a song for every statewide candidate, Brad. That includes your friend Bill Eigel. That includes the Will Sharfs and the Andrew Baileys of the world. And he gives them a campaign theme song for the last 2 weeks of the campaign. He also handicaps each race and the path of victory for the most viable candidates. So I would suggest folks check it out. My favorite parts were where Scott drops a reference to Sammy Sosa, which I think is just fantastic. He also points out that Casey Burns is not a fan of Mizzou, and I have to stand in solidarity with Casey because I am a notorious Mizzou hater, but that is a different topic. So folks should watch it. If you like to learn about what's happening in Missouri and what's the status of these races, and you want to laugh a little bit, watch Scott's midweek update. Today, Brad, Scott has planned to be on the Kehoe bus in the afternoon. So if you want to know what's going on with the Kehoe bus and the controversy, and you want to hear straight from somebody from Kehoe's campaign, watch that. Scott has the first midweek update of today. So Scott's doing a doubleheader today. The first show is at 9 a.m. So folks can follow Scott on any of his socials at Scott Fawn and watch those shows today.
I heard there's a story that you didn't talk about. The story I heard was Scott Fawn was a former diesel mechanic, and the reason that Kehoe's got him on the bus is because they've been having some problems with the bus because it is 21 years old and it's an older bus, and they decided that they didn't want to be caught out like somewhere on an interstate or some single.
Yes, you're right about that.
Single letter or double letter highway in the state of Missouri, and that's why they brought Scott along, because of the fact that he can get out and repair the bus.
You're exactly right, Brad. And I think Scott's going to talk about that today on the show. He also got a $1.6 million grant to block the carbon emissions. And to steal a phrase from Scott's tip sheet and the midweek update, a country boy can survive. We say grace. We say man. If you ain't into that, we don't give a damn.
I was going to say a prayer for Scott Fawn, but I don't think he needs it. He sounds like he's got everything.
Where could people request a prayer, Brad?
25 God Squad, Pastor Brad. If you need a prayer, we started talking about this yesterday. I have started my own church, and what's interesting was I have some people who are thinking this is a joke, but this is not a joke. I'm being very serious about that. I have my own church, God Squad, but at this point in time, it's not a physical church. It's in the cloud, godsquad.cloud. And there's been some confusion because of the fact that we haven't switched one of our other stations to our God Squad format. This is right now a streaming station, and this is a streaming station at godsquad.cloud. Matter of fact, it's the first church in the country, matter of fact, in the world, that's in the cloud at this point. And if you'd like to make a donation, we only need $999,000 to get our own radio station, so you can make a donation there. And by the way, I just also, day 2, Tracy and Rick and Tracy are in their new studios, and they're having some technical malfunctions. You always have that when you move from one location to another. There's always little glitches, little things you got.
Well, you're certainly not doing a touchdown dance about that, Brad.
No.
And by the way, isn't the $999,000 coming from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting?
I wish it were, but I continue to say prayers for Rick and Tracy Ellis because of the fact that I know they need our prayers. Matter of fact, I'm not doing this facetiously. There was a post last week that Tracy made that asked people to pray for them for a successful transition to their new studios in Wentzville. So I probably prayed, I don't know, what time is it? 7:22
It's
right
7:22.
now? I probably prayed 30 times already this morning. So hopefully their technical aspect will be all taken care of, and they'll be able to move forward and make lots of money.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of The Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?